There's a part of you no one sees, a piece you don't talk about. Not with friends, not with lovers, maybe not even with yourself. Not because it's fake, but because it's too real, too raw, too intense. It doesn't speak in polite words or romantic cliches. It whispers when you're alone. Desire, fear, shame, control, confusion, all tangled in silence. Carl Jung didn't flinch from this. He named it the sexual shadow, not to condemn it, but to confront it, not to erase it, but to integrate it, because if you don't face it, it'll face you. In obsession, in numbness, in patterns you keep repeating without knowing why. This isn't just about love or attraction. It's about the parts of your sexuality labeled as wrong, dirty, too much. The parts you were taught to exile just to be loved. You hide what you once longed for. You suppress what once made you feel alive. And the more you bury it, the more it comes back in ways you don't recognize. Maybe you pull away from anyone who stirs something real. Maybe you chase empty encounters because intimacy terrifies you. Maybe you confuse sex with performance. Or worse, you feel nothing at all. You think something's broken, but Jung would say, you're not broken, you're split. Divided from your own depth. The sexual shadow is not dysfunction, it's disconnection. It's the place where your deepest wounds meet your deepest instincts. And when left unacknowledged, it doesn't die, it multiplies. Where repression turns into distortion, where shame mutates into obsession, where your own longing becomes something you fear. Jung warned, what you don't make conscious returns as fate. And nothing returns louder than suppressed sexual energy, because it isn't just desire, it's identity, it's truth. It's the most primal part of you clawing to be seen. Yet most people won't touch it. Not in therapy, not in spirituality, not even in their own thoughts. They bury it because it doesn't match the image they're protecting. The good man, the innocent woman, the polished, perfect version of themselves. But underneath the mask, the shadow burns. And the more you suppress it, the stronger it grows. It speaks through your fantasies, not the ones you choose, but the ones that choose you. Through dreams that wake you sweating, through relationships where you play roles that don't make sense, through guilt that rises right when you try to feel good, through panic when someone sees too much. The sexual shadow doesn't always scream. Sometimes it's silence. A stillness so deep it becomes detachment. You call it low libido. You call it stress. You call it maturity. But really it's grief. Grief for the parts of you never allowed to be real. Desire that had no name. Attraction that had no home. Power that was always too much. Jung didn't say the shadow must obey. He said it must be known, seen, welcomed, spoken to. Because once the conversation begins, something shifts. You stop fearing yourself. You stop apologizing for being human. And you begin the terrifying, beautiful work of becoming whole. This isn't about indulging every impulse. It's about understanding them, listening, asking, what part of me is speaking, and what does it need to be free? Which part of you is trying to awaken? Because underneath the sexual shadow lies something sacred, your innocent need to be whole. Not just physically whole, but emotionally, energetically, spiritually, the kind of wholeness that lives in the heart. Your sexual shadow is not proof that you're broken. It's proof that you're divided, and to become whole again, you must reclaim the parts you were taught to hide. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is where it begins, not with fantasy, not with denial, but with one honest question. What part of your desire have you buried? And what does it cost you to keep it buried? That's the first crack in the cage. Because your sexual shadow is not your enemy. It's the part of you that wants to come home. There's a reason you were taught to hide it. Not just by parents, not just by religion or society, but by the architecture of your own psyche. Jung believed the mind doesn't evolve as one single piece. It fractures, it compartmentalizes, it builds walls to survive. As a child, anything that feels unsafe, unacceptable, or too powerful to process gets pushed underground. That's not a flaw, that's defense. The ego, trying to protect you, hides whatever might threaten your ability to function. And what's hidden becomes shadow. When it comes to sexuality, that fragmentation is violent and early because desire isn't just about sex. It's about instinct, expression, power, vulnerability. It's the first time a child feels something enormous that has no name. And if that energy meets silence, shame, or punishment, it shuts down. The child learns. That part of me is unsafe. That part is wrong. That part must disappear. But what disappears distorts. It doesn't vanish. It mutates. And Jung warned, what we bury in the unconscious always returns, but never in its original form. It comes back as fear, as compulsion, as projection. Because the unconscious doesn't speak in logic. It speaks in symbols, in obsession, in fantasy, in revulsion. It casts your disowned innocence onto others. You become drawn to, or disgusted by, people who embody the very things you were forbidden to express. And you judge them, you crave them, you resent them, you try to fix them. But what you're really doing is trying to reclaim yourself. That's the trap of projection. The psyche reaches for its missing parts in others. You think it's about them, it's not. It's always been about you. The woman you can't stop imagining. The man who makes you feel weak and electric. The people you quietly envy or harshly judge. They are mirrors. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. And that especially includes, sexual reactions. If someone unsettles you, ask, what are they expressing that I've repressed? Is it freedom? Is it dominance, softness, need, rage, guiltless pleasure? Whatever it is, it's yours too. It just lives in your shadow. And as long as it stays hidden, you'll never feel free. Because repression doesn't lead to virtue. It leads to fracture. You become a half-person, polite smiles, well-rehearsed words, the illusion of emotional maturity. But underneath, something suffocates. The more composed your image becomes, the more turmoil gathers inside. Because your body remembers what your mind has denied. It hums in silence. It sends signals. It sabotages you when you least expect it. Desire doesn't vanish just because you've trained yourself to ignore it. It turns to shadow. And the deeper it hides, the more extreme it becomes. That's why so many people live two lives. One is clean, curated, and spiritual. The other is chaotic, compulsive, filled with contradictions they can't explain. That's not hypocrisy. That's a symptom of disconnect. And the more disowned your shadow is, the more control it gains over your life. Jung warned, the shadow is a tight passage, a narrow door, whose painful constriction no one is spared. But on the other side of that door is liberation. Because your shadow, especially your sexual shadow, isn't just where your pain lives. It's where your vitality lives, your joy, your unfiltered capacity to feel. Here's the hidden truth. Most people aren't exhausted because they're overworked. They're exhausted from suppressing themselves, the strain of trying to be appropriate, to feel appropriately, to desire acceptably. That's what drains the soul. Jung saw this in his patients. He said what we call neurosis is often just the refusal to suffer the real pain. People suffer either way. But instead of walking through it, they build homes inside the ruins of their shame. So what's the way forward? Not indulgence, not control, not sterilization, but consciousness. To sit with the parts of you that make you uncomfortable, to ask, where did I learn to fear this part of myself? Who told me this was wrong? And what would happen if I simply felt it, without acting on it, without shutting it down, just felt it? That's where integration begins. Not by moralizing the shadow, not by praying it away, but by entering into relationship with it. Because until you do, your sexual energy will remain split. It will leak in ways you can't predict. It will create confusion, resentment, sabotage, and silence. But once you start calling it in, understanding it, making space for it to exist consciously, it transforms. It becomes power. Not domination, but agency. Not performance, but presence. Not emptiness, but embodiment. You stop chasing things to feel whole. You stop suppressing yourself to feel safe. You stand inside your being, complete, rooted, real. Jung said wholeness is not perfection. Wholeness is the union of opposites. And nowhere is that union more necessary than in how you experience your desire. You're not wrong for wanting. You're not broken for feeling. But you are in danger if you keep splitting yourself between who you are and who you think you're supposed to be. The shadow won't stay quiet forever. And if you don't open the door, it'll come through the wall. Let it speak now, while it can still whisper, before it returns louder, before it returns as fate. You think you're in control. You think you're choosing who you're drawn to, who you love, who you avoid, who you chase. But within each of those choices is a blueprint you didn't design. A structure built from silence, shame, childhood, culture, trauma, absence. This is what Carl Jung warned us about. He said, "What we fail to make conscious becomes our fate." And nowhere is that warning louder than in your sexuality. Because you can build a beautiful life on the outside. You can have a career, a partner, a calendar, a smile. But if your sexual shadow remains hidden, your life will slowly fold in on itself until it becomes unrecognizable. You'll wake up next to someone you don't even feel. You'll look in the mirror and not know who's staring back. You touch without presence. You stay in relationships that dull you and destroy the ones that awaken you. You confuse emotional safety with numbness. You run from depth because it reminds you of pain. You crave what hurts and reject what heals. And you don't know why. But Jung did. He knew what happens when someone refuses to meet their sexual shadow. They don't just become distant. They become divided. And a divided person creates fractured relationships. You'll be physically near, but emotionally missing. Sexually active, yet psychologically sealed shut. You might smile during intimacy, while something inside you quietly disappears. And eventually, your partner will feel it. They won't know what's missing, but they'll feel it. They'll wonder if it's them. They'll question their worth. They'll search for answers they can't find. But it was never about them. It was about the shadow, unseen, unspoken, unwelcomed. That's how the sexual shadow dismantles connection, not through chaos, but through vacancy. You can't offer what you haven't reclaimed. You can't connect if you're split in two. You can't truly touch another soul if you're still afraid of your own. And the scariest part? People adapt. They normalize the emptiness. They call it stability. They call it maturity. They pretend the fire they once felt was just youth. But deep down, they know. They know they buried something real. And no amount of performance can replace it. That is the hidden consequence of a rejected sexual shadow. You don't just lose passion, you lose presence. And when presence dies, love becomes maintenance. Not intimacy, just routine. But the damage doesn't stop at relationships. It bleeds into how you move through the world. Into your creativity, your spirit, your sense of purpose. Jung said, repressed sexuality leads to psychic separation, not just in the bedroom, but in the soul. Because sexual energy isn't just physical, it's symbolic, it's architectural, it's the creative current of your being trying to move through you. And when that force is blocked, everything slows down. You procrastinate, you overthink, you numb, you fantasize instead of act, you retreat instead of express, and all of it feels logical, reasonable, justified. But it's not reason, it's resistance. It's resistance. You are resisting life within yourself. And the price of that resistance is silent dash, until it becomes everything, until your reflection no longer feels like your own, until your voice sounds like a stranger, until you stop believing something extraordinary will ever happen to you. You call it hunger, you call it fatigue, but Jung would call it disintegration. You are being dismantled by your refusal to feel. And society reinforces that disintegration. We live in a world hypersexualized but emotionally barren. We use sex to sell, to bait clicks, to draw attention. But we never sit with its truth. We never ask why we chase it endlessly, and yet rarely feel fulfilled. Why we talk loudly about it, but feel silent inside. Why we crave deeply, yet touch as if we're made of glass. Because society doesn't want your wholeness, it wants your confusion. The more disconnected you are from your inner world, the easier it is to manipulate, to monetize, to distract. Your shadow becomes profitable, and you remain suspended, half awake, half alive. But Jung didn't offer despair. He offered confrontation. He said, meeting your shadow is where true transformation begins. Reclaiming your sexual shadow is not just about healing trauma. It's about reclaiming power. Because once you understand what truly moves you, you can no longer be controlled. You stop needing empty validation. You stop accepting lifeless intimacy. You stop softening your desires to keep others comfortable. You stop performing your sexuality and start living it as presence. But only if you're willing to walk through fire, to scream for the years you swallowed shame, to feel the wants you never voiced, to admit you're living a life that is only half yours. And that's not weakness. It's not regression. It's the first act of becoming whole. Because what the world calls darkness, Jung called potential. And the moment you step into your shadow, your real life begins. Not the one built from denial, not the one others tried to fix, but the one that's been waiting underneath it all. Your sexual shadow doesn't need fixing. It needs facing, because the only thing more dangerous than your desire is your refusal to meet it. You spent years locking this part of yourself away. Maybe you didn't mean to, but now you get to choose what happens next. Maybe you thought hiding it would protect you. Maybe someone told you it was the right thing to do. To be clean, to be good, to be safe. But the part of you that you buried, the one you disowned, silenced, covered, it didn't vanish. It's been waiting, not to hurt you, not to control you, but to be seen. Because your sexual shadow isn't evil. It's unclaimed life, untapped power, unspoken truth. And it's not going anywhere. You can keep hiding, or you can turn around and face what's been chasing you all along. The choice is simple. Simplicity or performance. Presence or pretending. A life lived on the surface, or a life lived from the soul. So if this touched something real inside you, don't let it fade. Say it out loud. I'm ready to reclaim what I've hidden, not to prove anything, but to remember who you were before the shame took over. Subscribe if you want more Jungian truths like this. Share this with someone who's still afraid of what already lives inside them. Stop running. It's time to come home to yourself.